So hello everyone and welcome to this week's webinar on the power of the mind and your well-being. This is part of our winter-spring webinar series with Leukaemia and Blood Cancer New Zealand. My name is Sally Black and I'm the Support Services Coordinator in the Central Region, so that encompasses the Lower North Island. Now, just before I introduce you to our guest speaker today, I just wanted to remind people that there is a Q&A button down the bottom, so you might just need to hover your mouse or your finger. And there's a Q&A button where you can click and type questions. So through Tara's presentation, if you've got any questions, please type them in there. We'll have some time at the end where I'll be able to read those to Tara and hopefully get some answers for you. So it is my absolute pleasure to now introduce you to Tara Connell. Tara is very special in my region because she answered a call or a request for a session in mindfulness for our Hawke's Bay support group. And she's been gifting us with her skills, knowledge and expertise ever since. So Tara is trained in mindfulness-based stillness meditation at the Gawler Cancer Foundation in Australia and registered as a meditation teacher with Meditation Australia. Tara has a background in corporate training and development with a special interest in personal effectiveness, the connection between thoughts and behaviours, and the power of the mind to shape and define our present moment experience and therefore our lives. So it is my great pleasure to introduce you to Tara Connell and hand over to you, Tara.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you very much. And hi, everybody. Lovely to be here. It's a real privilege to spend some time with everybody. And although it feels a little bit weird because you all can see me and I can't see you, I know you're all there, so that's great. And I'm looking forward to responding to questions and comments and so on in the later part of the webinar. So this is a PowerPoint-based webinar, so I'll be talking to you, but I'll also be taking you through the slides. And so we're just going to start with I need to just share the screen and put the PowerPoint up. And there we go. I think we're good. So you're looking at the power of the mind and well-being, the title of our webinar, and we're going to take you through the connection between what's on your mind, how you're feeling, and the experience you're having. And William Shakespeare had an interesting thing to say in this area. He said, "There's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." There's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And then somebody else famous from the past had this to say. John Milton, very famous English poet, said, "The mind is its own place and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven." And then there's a little bit of a theme developing here because when we look at the Dalai Lama says, the most important thing is transforming our minds for a new way of thinking, a new outlook. Strive to develop a new inner world. And a Chinese philosopher, ancient Chinese philosopher, Lao Tzu said, if you correct your mind, the rest of your life will fall into place. And we put a puzzle head that we use for a lot of our seminars on the diagram here. So it seems that there's some consensus throughout the ages that what goes on in our mind, how we think, has a major influence on our experience. And so what that's telling us is that the mind has power. The thoughts we think, the words we speak, either out loud to us, to others, or to our own internal self-talk, those thoughts we think and the words that we speak powerfully shape our attitudes, our beliefs, and our perceptions. And the definition of perception is the way of regarding, understanding, or interpreting something. It's a mental impression. So your perception is a mental impression. But what's interesting is that perception is not reality. How you see something is not necessarily how it really is. It's your mental impression that you formed. The definition of reality, the world or state of things as they actually exist. Existence that's absolute, self-sufficient or objective and not subject to human decisions or conventions. So perception exists entirely in the mind. And mental gymnastics can turn any belief into reality. Reality itself, though, exists completely outside of the mind and can't be easily manipulated. So perception is not reality, but it can become your reality. It can become a person's reality because it has a really powerful influence on how we look at reality. Perception acts as a lens through which we view reality, and it influences how we focus, process, remember, interpret, understand, synthesize, decide about, and act on reality. So your perception is what causes you to then have the experience that you have. So in doing so, because of the power of our perception, our tendency is to assume that how we perceive reality is an accurate representation of what really it actually is. So if we go back to Milton's slide where he says, his quote, where he says, the mind is its own place and in itself can make a heaven of hell or a hell of heaven. What he's really saying is that your perception can become your reality. So your perception of the situation or experience actually has an impact on your biochemistry, and that contributes to either feelings of calm, feelings of heaven, or feelings of chaos. We could say those are feelings of hell. So what we're saying is that here that our minds are really powerful, and they can make a heaven or a hell for us regardless of the reality of the circumstance or the situation that we find ourselves in. So it's all about our perception and the impact that the perception has on our experience. So where to start? A useful place to begin is with our thoughts. If you think about it, whatever you do begins with a thought. Attending the webinar today at some point seemed like a good idea. So here you are, and thank you very much for being here. Whatever you do when the webinar finishes will be determined by your mind. You'll have a thought about what to do next. What you have for your next meal begins with a thought. The next person you spend time with, the next outing with family or friends, the next holiday, your next purchase, each one of those things begins with a thought. And when something happens around you or to you, here's what happens. An event happens, a situation happens, you have a thought about it. From the thought triggers a feeling, and out of the feeling you behave, you act in response or reaction to the event that's occurring around you. But what triggers the whole process is the thought that you have. And interestingly, the psychologists tell us that the average person has about 60,000 thoughts a day. No wonder it's busy in your head. About 60,000 thoughts a day, and about 80% of them are apparently negative. So many of those thoughts are repetitive, and we're usually completely unaware of most of them. So in other words, we tend to say the same sorts of things to ourselves over and over. And so we're potentially self-sabotaging our well-being with what goes on between our ears. So let me give you a little example of somebody doing just that. Here's Snoopy and Charlie Brown. And they're sitting there hanging out on a beautiful lake view, just chilling. And look at where Charlie Brown's mind has taken him. Someday we'll all die, Snoopy. And Snoopy says, true, but on all the other days, we won't. So surely Charlie Brown could just stop thinking like that. Why doesn't he just stop it? Surely he could just, bring an end to that. Let's have a little investigate and learn something about how the mind actually works and why it would be hard for Charlie Brown to just stop it. So just for a moment, what I'd like you to do, please, is something called the white horse exercise. So just for a few breaths, if it feels comfortable for you, please close your eyes and spend a little time not thinking of a white horse. So all you have to do with your eyes closed is not think about a white horse. Okay, so how did you go? For most people, that white horse just keeps on charging into their thoughts. It seems that trying not to think of it just draws attention to it and makes it more of a focus. So let's investigate a little more. This time, we're going to do the red rose exercise. So this time with the red rose exercise, again with your eyes closed if that feels comfortable, spend a little time thinking of a red rose. Pay close attention to the details. Do you imagine a rose in space? Or is it in a vase? Or perhaps it's still on the rose bush? Is it a bud that's just forming? Or is it a full-blown red rose? And perhaps you can even imagine its perfume, the scent of the rose. Perhaps you can feel the stem or the petals. Just concentrate on the rose a little longer. Just thinking about that red rose. And so now letting the red rose fade away. And perhaps that second investigation was a little easier to do than the white horse. Focusing on a red rose for a little while is usually easy enough. And the second investigation, this red rose exercise, also holds the key to the white horse. The most immediate way to not think about something is to think about something else. And importantly, we need to be aware that, that if we try to not think of something, that actually focuses the mind onto that very thing, and just as effectively as if you decided to think about it. So when you say, I won't think about that, what you're doing is actually consolidating that thought in your mind. So for poor Charlie Brown, he couldn't just stop thinking that someday we might die. He was going to have to do something different to actually change the thought. So let me take you on to the next idea here. It's useful to know that the only thing that makes it a part of your life, whatever that particular thing is that you keep thinking about it. Charlie Brown keeps on thinking that thought. So what could Charlie Brown focus on while he's working on changing the thought? You're likely to get more traction with a replacement thought if it's not in direct opposition to the current faulty thought that you might have. So for example, if I become aware that I'm saying to myself, oh, I'm such a loser, I never get things right, and I want to change it to, I'm a winner, I ace everything that I do. I'm likely, after a few rounds of that, to say to myself, yeah, right. And probably I won't persevere with that after a day or two. So you need something to help you while you're learning to replace the faulty self-talk or the less than useful self-talk with something that's more useful and truthful that your mind can actually accept. So here's where we come to 3 of the 8 communication principles that we work with at Mindful Nation. We call these the Mindful Nation Foundation Principles, and of the 8 of them that we work with that help you to actually work on replacing a faulty thought, I've just chosen 3 that I think you'll find really useful to work with. So the 3 are there on the little notebook with the glasses. The first one, you cannot not communicate, you're always communicating. It's important to know that while you're drawing breath, you are sending a message about something to yourself, to other people. So you're communicating with your facial expressions, you're communicating with your physical appearance, with all of your non-verbals. If you're talking, you're also communicating with the sound of your voice as well as the words that you're using. And even if you're saying nothing, you're still sending a message to yourself and to other people. People will pick up on whether you're feeling happy or sad or anxious or irritable or joyful or excited. They can pick all that up from your non-verbals even without a word. It's also useful to know that your feelings are triggered by your thoughts. So when something happens, you have a thought first, and it's the thought that then has a feeling come up, and you act out of the feeling. And the third one, your thoughts determine your reality. So that's your perception of reality that is actually determined by the thoughts that you're thinking about the experience that you're having. So those 3 foundation principles are really useful to make a note of, and you can use those as your transitional thought when you find yourself thinking a less than useful thought. If you try and stop thinking about it, you've seen what's happened with that. You just keep on thinking about it. And if you try to replace it with the polar opposite, which is what we often do, your mind simply won't accept that. So it will reject it, and that will become quite disheartening, and that can become quite stressful. So what you want to use is one of these interim thoughts that are quite neutral and that allow you to start to loosen off the hold of that previous faulty thought. So if we come to our next slide, think about our event, thought, feeling, and behavior. If you catch yourself thinking a thought that's not going to serve you, that's going to trigger an unpleasant feeling, you want to put in one of those foundation principles in there. And if Charlie Brown had have done that, he likely wouldn't have had the same sort of gloomy, doomy feelings that he was likely to have had. So we think about Charlie Brown's thought, it would have had a corresponding emotional and physical manifestation. His thought will have affected his biochemistry and will have triggered the stress response. That's the flight, fight, or freeze, and that will cause a cascade of physical reactions. Snoopy, on the other hand, will have had, just a cruise mode, hanging out, chilling, enjoying the view. And he will have been just staying in the relaxation response, the rest and digest mode of his central nervous system. And that's where healing can take place. So if we go back to our Milton quote, you get to make the choice about the thought that you have. And if you have a thought that is a stressful thought that has you feeling anxious or tense or unhappy, that's going to trigger your stress response. And you go into what's called the red zone. If you have more like Snoopy and you're just chilling and relaxing and you have a neutral thought, my thoughts determine my reality, my feelings are triggered by my thoughts, I cannot not communicate, you could be working with those, then that's likely to have you in the relaxation response in the green zone. So let's have a quick review of the red zone, green zone. So this webinar is not going to go into detail about those two arms of your autonomic nervous system. It's just useful to quickly glance at the PowerPoint, and on the red side, notice that there's a whole bunch of things that happen in terms of hormones that get produced and other things that occur as a consequence of being in the red zone in your flight, fight, or freeze, compared to being in the green zone, where there's growth and healing, and where you have a relaxation of muscular tension, your digestive enzymes start to produce more frequently, there's an increase in serotonin and melatonin, so you start to relax and your immune system is able to regulate and function properly. So those foundation principles will help you to avoid going into the red zone if you're having a faulty thought and move you into the green zone. And that's where we want to spend more of our time. We're designed to actually operate from this green zone, just move into red when we need to deal with something and then go back to green. But for most of us in the West, we stay in what's called emergency mode and we kind of get stuck in that low-grade red zone, and that has a whole potential knock-on effect in terms of health and wellness. So then, just back to those foundation principles, if you personalize those foundation principles and you say, I cannot not communicate, I'm always communicating, or my feelings are triggered by my thoughts determine my reality, you're personalizing those foundation principles and you're making them much more meaningful for you and much more likely for them to get traction. So every time you catch yourself having a non-supportive thought, you take a conscious breath and then say one of the foundation principles to yourself. And every time you choose to do that, you're laying down a new neural pathway in your brain for your mind to go down with that thought, and you're gradually removing the old pathway, the old habit of thinking in that particular way. A really effective way to work with these principles is to consciously and deliberately choose one to start with and say it to yourself 10 times a day. Just saying it quietly to yourself, it's your self-talk, every day for 7 days, 10 times a day, every day for 7 days. A really effective way to keep on building on that is to then in the second week add the second principle and do the same with that. So now you're saying 2 principles to yourself 10 times a day. In the next week, you add your third principle and you repeat the pattern. Keep a note of what feelings you become aware of as you start to work with these principles in this way. They seem very simple, they're incredibly powerful, and they're very practical to use. If you want to stretch out of your comfort zone a little bit more, then you can progressively start to say the principles out loud to yourself as you stand in front of a mirror. And notice what comes up for you as you actually start to do that. It's good to keep a journal note of what you start to notice about your thoughts and your feelings as you engage in this experiment with the foundation principles. Another thing that triggers our stress response and moves us into the red zone, into flight, fight, or freeze, is our tendency to focus on the negative rather than the positive. So we tend to focus on the experiences that we code as negative or unpleasant. And something will happen around us, but what we tend to do is pay attention to the things that we find to be unpleasant or that we find to be negative. And that's because the human brain typically detects the negative or negative information faster than the positive. And it seems to be primed to track the environment for possible threats, which makes sense if you think about it. We want to make sure that we can quickly check the environment, make sure that it's safe and that there's no tigers that we have to run away from or anything else that we might need to deal with. So we actually have a brain that is primed to check for the negative. And what that means is that we will be deliberately looking for the things that are negative or unpleasant. Our ability to pick up on facial expressions is a really good example, with fearful faces being perceived more rapidly than happy or neutral faces. So you can scan a room full of faces and your brain is more likely to pick up on all of those ones that seem to be of concern, seem to be registering something or signifying something that we're fearful about, compared to the happy or the neutral faces. And since, think about it, that makes good sense as humans, because we want to make sure that we're not going to be in any threat from any of the people in the room. So we want to make sure that we're scanning for expressions that could let us know, are these people going to be safe for me or not safe for me? Interestingly, though, in some experiments that were conducted by psychologists in 2006, even when fearful faces were made invisible to conscious awareness, the amygdala, the threat detector in the brain, actually lit up. So that's telling us that even when we're consciously not aware of expressions that we might code as something we should be fearful of, our brain actually picks that up and registers it and sends a little warning bell to say, warning, warning, there's something to be afraid of, and we go straight into flight, fight, or freeze. So when an event is coded as negative, what happens is the brain stores it carefully for future reference. And it's no accident that we have the expression, once burned, twice shy. Or is it once bitten, twice shy, once burned, twice shy? It's got very widespread currency in our society, and most people nod wisely when they hear it. So the brain is actually like Velcro for negative experiences. It hangs on to them. And it's like Teflon for positive experiences. So in other words, positive experiences tend to slip right on by, whereas we hang on and grip, or the brain hangs on and grips to the negative ones. And that's what's called having a negativity bias of memory. So the brain has a negativity bias. That means that even though most of one's recent experiences are either neutral or positive, most of us will find it really hard to recall a pleasant or a good experience, but the negative or the unpleasant experiences just come to mind really easily. This bias, this negativity bias or tendency, means that the background feeling of what it feels like to be you has become quite low and pessimistic. And that's the case for many of us in the West because of that negativity bias. And that in itself is enough to keep you in the red zone and keep you in a state of contraction. So let me show you a little slide here, little cartoon. Here's the researchers saying, according to the latest research, the average human body is 20% water and 80% stress, which is no surprise given the negativity bias. Now, we're not saying to suppress negative emotions or negative experiences. It's really important to be able to identify the things that are challenging, that have been unpleasant, to be able to learn from them and then let go and be able to move on. So we're not saying you've got to suppress things or deny things. What we're rather encouraging you to do is to actively look out for and foster positive experiences and learn how to take them in so you can soak them in and they become a permanent part of you. And this strategy of what's called taking in the good helps you to spend more time in the green zone, and that provides a whole bunch of physical, psychological, and emotional benefits that go with spending time in the green zone. So let's learn a little bit about taking in the good. So here's a beautiful Picasso image to have a little look at with the taking in the good. Dr. Rick Hanson, this is really his work, and he's written a number of books, one of them called The Buddha's Brain. And in that, he describes 3 simple steps that we can take to internalize the process, internalize the positive experience that we're having, and that molds and shapes our memory, and that impacts our sense of what it feels like to be us, what it feels like to be you. So let's show you the 3 steps. So it's a 3-step process. We can turn a positive fact, so it's a sunny day, the rose bushes are smelling beautiful, I'm playing with the dog, the grandchildren are smiling at me, I've got a chocolate ice cream, whatever it might be, lots of positive experiences. It's turning the positive facts into a positive experience. It's being able to savor the experience, and then being able to imagine or feel that the experience is entering deeply into your mind and body. And if you think about it, step 1, turning positive facts into positive experiences, good things happen all the time. It's just that most of the time we don't simply notice them. And if we do notice them, we hardly feel them. So for example, someone pays you a compliment. They say, oh, you're looking great, shirts, I love that shirt on you. You're looking really, full of buck and bounce today. Or they might do something nice for you. They might hold the door open. They might bring you some flowers. It might just simply be the smell of the new season's asparagus or the new season's tomatoes. Or you finished something that was difficult. It could be any one of a number of things. We tend not to notice any of those things. We're so busy getting on to the next thing. So good things are happening, but we're not paying attention to them. So if you can learn to bring a mindful awareness of a positive, of a situation, of a positive fact that you find, and really open up and let that in, you're starting to turn it into an experience, into a positive experience. And then if you can savor the experience by staying with the feeling of it for about 5 seconds, maybe 10 seconds if you have that time, but certainly for 5 seconds, and you stay present with it by focusing on your breath, by feeling the feelings that you're having, becoming aware of your bodily sensations, you're really letting the experience fill your present moment experience, and you're filling it as intensely and as vividly as you can. That's really savoring the experience. So for example, if someone does something nice or thoughtful or kind for you, let the feeling of being cared about, of being taken, of being looked after, let that in, let it really permeate through you. And you might notice some warmth in the chest. You might feel a pulsing or a tingling up and down the front of your body. There'll be some physical sensation that you experience as you take time to become aware of really savoring that lovely thing, that good thing that's just being done for you. And then you imagine or feel that the experience is deeply entering into your body and into your mind. And it's a little bit like imagining a golden light was coming into you, or perhaps there was a jewel being placed in a treasure chest in your heart. And you keep relaxing your body and absorbing the emotions, really absorbing the sensations and the thoughts of the experience. The longer something's held in your awareness and the more emotionally stimulating it is, the stronger the memory is that you're building. So the stronger the memory that you're building there. And you're starting to develop a memory bank of good things, good experiences that you can more easily start to recall, and they start to overshadow that negativity bias. So I've talked you through the process. Let's actually have a little experience of it. So it's very simple, it's very straightforward, and it's not necessarily easy because the brain's not conditioned to do this. So you might like to take a comfortable seat and just get yourself nice and comfortable where you're sitting. And I'm going to talk you through, I'm going to lead you through this process. So just as you did with the white horse and with the red rose, just allow your eyes to softly close. And you're going to just take this very gently without struggling or without beating yourself up. We're just going to take it gently and patiently and persistently and with some self-kindness. So the first thing that you're going to do is just begin to become aware of your breath. Just noticing the sensation of breathing. And you might notice that there's a coolness to the air as you breathe in through your nose and a warmth as you breathe out. And you might also notice that your breath travels across your nostrils and down into the back of the pharynx. You might notice also that it travels all the way down into the lungs. And then it reverses direction and travels all the way back out. Just following the breath as it travels in and out of the body. Perhaps noticing that transition point between the end of the inhale and the beginning of the next exhale. And then again, where the exhale becomes the next inhale. Just following the breath for a little longer. And then beginning to recall a positive fact, something that you can bring to mind. Perhaps it's the smile of a child. Perhaps it's the sensation of the sun on your face. Perhaps it's the smell of the spring flowers. Perhaps it's the feeling of a grandchild's hand in yours. Just recalling a positive fact and beginning to notice the image that's associated with that positive fact. And you might perhaps hear some sounds. There might even be a smell or a sensation associated with that. Really opening up to the memory of the event and allow the experience to begin to fill your body. If your mind wanders, just bring it back to the experience with the next breath. And begin to focus on the sensations and the feelings in your body right now. As you rest your attention on that positive fact, really allow the sensations and the feelings in your body to intensify and get a little stronger with each breath. Feeling the warmth in your chest, in your upper body, and feeling that sense of dropping into the experience, relaxing and releasing into the experience. Almost as if you are soaking in it now. Gently savoring and soaking in that positive experience. And as you sink into the experience, sense your intent that this experience is sinking into you. The two-way process, you sink into the experience sinks and soaks into you. And as you do so, you might begin to imagine a golden light coming into your body. Or you might feel a sense of a soothing balm spreading inside of you, a beautiful soothing ointment spreading all the way inside of you. Or perhaps you might imagine a precious jewel going into the treasure chest in your heart. becoming aware or knowing that this experience is sinking into you now and becoming a part of your internal treasure chest, becoming a resource that you can take with you wherever you go. Good. That's good. And now coming to the end of the taking in the good meditation, taking a few deeper conscious breaths, perhaps rolling your shoulders, and then when you're ready, gently opening your eyes. And so taking in the good is a powerful practice that you can use anytime. It builds a stronger immune system. It makes the cardiovascular system less reactive to stress. It lifts your mood. It increases optimism, resilience, and resourcefulness. You get your bounce back. And it counteracts the effects of painful experience. So because the brain has that negativity bias, we will tend to go to the things that are painful. So poor Charlie Brown, he's sitting in front of a beautiful lake view with his good mate Snoopy, and all he can think about is, someday we're going to die. And it's true, I mean, we will, but it's not necessarily useful to focus on that when there are some beautiful positive things, some life-giving opportunities right in front of you. So taking in the good has a powerful impact on your immune system. Good feelings today also increase the likelihood of good feelings tomorrow. So you get to have more time in the green zone. You have this kind of nice cyclical effect that happens. So developing the habit of taking in the good is all about developing and nourishing a sense of well-being. And that nourishes also a sense of contentment and that sense of peace inside of you that's always available to you. It becomes easier and easier with practice. The hardest one was the one you've just done. Every one after this becomes easier and easier as you train your brain, as you get to use the power of your mind in this very powerful way. And it absolutely helps you to spend more time in the green zone. And the more time you spend in the green zone, the less reactive you become, because your threat detector, the amygdala in the brain, starts to quieten down. So let me give you this thought here, that the capacity of human life is beyond our imagination. What counts is the human capacity to investigate and transform our own mind and the world around us in a powerful and positive direction. And Gelek Rinpoche, he's sadly dead now, but he's a very famous and well-regarded Tibetan monk. And he was born before the Chinese took over, the Chinese uprising in Tibet. And so he had some pretty unpleasant experiences, as indeed did the Dalai Lama. But what he's saying is that regardless of whatever else is going on, what we have is this extraordinary capacity to transform our own mind and therefore transform our experience of the world around us in this powerful and very positive direction. So essentially what we're saying, slipped a little bit ahead here. I'm just going to go back one. Sorry, everybody. There's my arrows. Here we go. What we're really saying here is that the power of your mind is always available. It's always with you. And the power of the mind will work in one way or another. It will either work, if you like, against you with the negativity bias, or it will work for you, but you'll need to train it and discipline it and take control of it to get all of what's on offer in terms of having that increased well-being that can come with a mind that is under control and that allows you to spend more time in the green zone. So thank you for choosing to spend time with me today. I hope you found some useful tips and ideas, and I look forward to answering some questions or perhaps hearing comments that you might have to make as we come to this stage of the webinar. So I'm going to hand this over to Sally, Just put my little "I feel like saying" board up there. That's you might not have any questions, but you might feel like saying something. You're very welcome, and it would be lovely to hear from some people. So Sally, over to you.
Thanks, Tara. That was absolutely wonderful. And I have to say, taking in the good exercise, I absolutely loved. I'm keeping that one in my back pocket for myself.
It's fabulous.
So I will just start by saying we've had a few questions around whether the slides will be available. And just, sorry, I should have said at the beginning, this is being recorded. So it will be available on our YouTube channel. And so the easiest way to do that is probably just to access through our website, so leukaemia.org.nz. You find out more about our webinars there, and there's a link to our YouTube channel. And I will also say that Tara very, very kindly did some recordings with some meditation exercises during lockdown, and I know there's a few of them available on our YouTube channel still from that as well. Mm-hmm. So are you all right for some questions, Tara? Are we all right for time?
I am. I'll also just add in quickly, I haven't actually done it yet, but I'm going to record for you something called the Healing Lake Meditation, which is using the power of the mind to visualize and to savor the benefit of the experience, which I take you through. So Sally, I'll record that on the weekend and send it to you, that you can upload that as well.
Oh, that would be amazing. Thank you, Tara. That's really lovely of you. Right, we've got a few questions through. I've got a few questions tend to be more around meditation. The first question I've got is in regards to meditation apps, and someone is asking, are they a good place to start? And what are your recommendations, if any, in regards to those apps?
I think that there are apps and apps. I think the one that I would probably recommend is Headspace. Would be the one that you would to use. A number of my own students who've actually done the 8-week mindfulness-based stillness meditation course with me have gone on to use Headspace as their extra resource that they use. And for those of you with children, there's some fantastic options for the children on there as well, so they can keep a record of number of successive days of meditating and so on, and that can be quite encouraging. So Headspace would be the one that I would recommend. I think that if you only use an app, you can potentially run into some challenges with meditation, and I would always recommend that you found a teacher. And so you want to look for a teacher who can actually show you where they've done their training, or tell you where they've done their training. Meditation is not regulated in New Zealand as it is in Australia, and it is anybody can say that they teach meditation. And because the mind is so powerful, you've got to be really careful that the person that you trust to work with you, you want to make sure that they know what they're doing and they're not going to muck with your head. So apps are good. Headspace is great, and I suggest that you get yourself a meditation teacher. There's some very good teachers in this country.
Lovely.
Long answer.
Thank you. No, that's wonderful.
Welcome.
Someone else is saying, is there much scientific evidence to show that power of the mind can have a positive effect on our physical health?
Oh gosh, yes, absolutely. Without citing everything chapter and verse, there's just masses of stuff now. We are fortunate to live in an era where in the last 20 years, we've started to, and more as, with each, as those 2 decades have, gotten closer to now, more recently is what I'm trying to say, we understand now that actually the brain changes all the time. So we used to think, the neuroscientists and everything used to think that that the brain, once it was formed, was kind of set and that was it, and you couldn't do anything about that. But what we know now is with neuroplasticity, it's changing all the time. So every time you think a thought, you're either reinforcing that thought or you're consolidating in some way, or you're introducing a new thought. If you're like with Charlie Brown and you're working on savoring the good, you're starting to introduce some new thoughts and with your foundation principles. So the brain's changing in a state of change, or there's an opportunity to change it all the time. There's heaps of evidence to show that if we can spend more time in the green zone, and you're either in the red zone or in the green zone. Dr. Bruce Lipton is the person who's informed the work in this area. You're in one or the other. You can't be in a little bit of, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. It's quite binary. The more we stay in the red zone, the more we're in the fight, flight, or freeze, with all of the attendant hormonal cascading through the body. That, so inflammation markers go up, all of that. If you can spend more time in the green zone, you're actually giving your immune system a chance to catch its breath. And that is where healing starts to take place. So without giving you chapter and verse, there is stacks of stuff around. Sally, what I'll do, if you'll just remind me, is I'll actually send some references. For those of you who like to look up the evidence, I'll send you some references that you can check.
That would be lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you. That answers another question that someone said, where can I read some more about the red zone and green zone? So that's perfect.
Yeah, Dr. Sipton, yeah.
And this may sort of be falling into that a bit more as well. Someone has said that they find that they used to do meditation quite well before diagnosis. They went through their diagnosis and treatment, and they found that post-treatment, they would describe themselves more in the red zone. And they're saying their thoughts are almost ruminating on relapse and
yes.
What might happen post. And they're just wondering, have you got some other helpful tips and tricks of where to just start with maybe getting back into meditation?
Yes, absolutely. And can I just say that you're absolutely not on your own with that. That's I've heard that oftentimes, and it's understandable when you consider the negativity, what's called the negativity bias of the brain and of memory. So it's much easier for us to recall the things that are, frightening or fearful in some way than it is to recall the positive. So the negativity bias will contribute to your having those thoughts, and then of course the thinking mind that wants to protect you. It's going to just chew on those thoughts and go round and round and round. And of course, then you get into what's called a psychocybernetic loop. You're thinking these thoughts, it having an impact on your biochemistry, which contributes to you're thinking more thoughts again, and you get locked into that loop. The foundation principles would be a good place to start. So I would just start gently, and don't try and stop the thoughts, because you saw what happened with the white horse. They just get sticky. You just have white horses charging around inside your head. So if you started with one of those foundation principles, and perhaps start, I would just start with, I cannot not communicate. I'm always communicating. That's a really neutral statement. The thinking mind can't disagree with it, because it's a neutral statement of belief. So there's nothing to argue about with that. So if every time you find yourself starting to get into that, ruminating in that way, you notice that, take a deep breath, and then say your foundation principle. And it's that moment of choice of taking a breath and putting that new thought in. You cannot not communicate, you're always communicating, excepting say it in the first person, I cannot not communicate. You're starting to gently break the hold, or change the shape of that neural pathway that old thought's going down. So that would be where I would start, and take it gently, take it kindly. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. Another question here. When I am in a moment that is full of happiness, sometimes I feel pressure from myself to embrace this moment, but I don't always know how. Do you have any suggestions of how to be more present in the moment?
Oh, well, boy, take in the good. That's absolutely take in the good. Actually, Sally, what I might do with that too is I might record that as well, and then we'll take you through that.
Oh, that would be lovely.
I think what happens for many of us, and myself included, if I've had if something's, well, like lockdown, it's, COVID, hey, what a year. I found that my meditation practice was really challenged during lockdown. It was just really challenged. And I sort of gave into all my, I'm going to eat chocolate and all that sort of stuff. And And then post-lockdown, I thought, okay, I've got to really get a grip on this, and I've got to get back into my practice again. And I found it very challenging. I found it really quite difficult to do. And so I thought, well, I need to go and listen to some of the audios of my own teachers, because I know what to do, but I'm just struggling to do it. And I found that listening to someone else's voice, I found that really effective. So that's why I'm suggesting that if I record these for you, then you can actually listen to the recording of taking in the good and really develop that practice. And then when you suddenly become aware that you're in an experience, it's a positive experience and you want to embrace it, just take it gently and just allow that experience to just come into you as we do in that taking in the good practice. So I think one of the things that happens is we put ourselves under pressure. Oh gosh, I've got to look for the positive. Oh gosh, I've got to really savor this. And immediately you go into contract. You've gone into sympathetic nervous system, SNS, which is your red zone. And so of course it's going to be very difficult for you to let anything good come in. So hope that's helpful.
Thank you. And this is looking like it might be our last question. Tara, this might be hard to ask, but is there a time frame where you can really start to notice the difference in your mind and body by having a regular practice?
The research shows that a minimum of 10 minutes a day, every day for 8 weeks. If we were to take a functional MRI scan of your brain at the beginning of that period, and again at the end of that period, there would be a noticeable difference in the prefrontal cortex of your brain, which is your houses your executive function, decision making, all that sort of stuff happens in there. So there's actually an observable change in the architecture of the brain. It's not to say that you can't have the benefits of it in a shorter period of time. It's just that you're less likely to get traction with the practice. And then because the thinking mind has got its own habits and patterns of things that it likes to do, charging around like a white horse, you will struggle to make your practice a daily practice and get the benefit from that's available. So yeah, that's what the evidence shows. But actually, I'm a sort of a realist. So what I say to my students is, listen, I want 5 minutes a day. Give me 5 minutes a day. Tell me that you're practicing 5 minutes a day, every day. That's good. And you'll start to notice, it's not a big bang notice, but what you'll start to notice is that you just a bit less reactive. And so, for example, one of the things that people often notice is that whereas they might sort of, there's a big noise outside and they jump and they startle, a big noise can occur and they just go, oh, there was a noise. So what happens is that the little threat detector in the brain, the amygdala, that's our sort of guard dog, and it's doing all of that all the time. As we meditate, it actually gets a bit smaller, and so it becomes less reactive. So that means you startle less easily. You'll still startle if there's a real threat, but you're less likely to perceive situations as threats. So yeah, so just even 5 minutes a day is good, but 10 minutes a day, every day for 8 weeks is definitely going to get a change in the architecture of your brain. I don't think I can give you a short answer, Sally, sorry.
No, that's brilliant. And I was just going to say, I think that will be so comforting to a lot of people, because I hear that from patients all the time, that, they think it needs to be a real commitment of, 15 minutes a day or even longer. So 5 minutes a day just seems a little bit more real and achievable. I think a lot of people will appreciate that answer. Definitely.
And even if all you do is you decide, actually, I'm not even up for actually meditating yet, and meditating is just the discipline of bringing your concentration onto a particular topic. That's actually all meditation really is. A mental discipline involving attention regulation is the actual definition. Even if all you do is when you're brushing your teeth, you just be completely present with brushing your teeth. Feel the sensation of the bristles of the brush on the gums. Feel the taste the toothpaste. Feel the liquid in your mouth. You just be present with brushing your teeth. That actually helps to train your mind to be better able to stay in the present moment and take up the benefits of that.
Brilliant. Well, actually, I think that comes to the end of our questions. I'm just getting through comments now, really, just to thank you very much. People are saying, wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. A lot of people very keen to watch it over again and do some of those exercises. So thank you so much, Tara, for joining us today and for giving your time, sharing your knowledge. Absolutely brilliant. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And just a reminder, you know, this is part of our webinar series, which is running until the end of the year. So we'll be back again next Friday. I think our next Friday session is a bit later at 2 o'clock. It's on Hodgkin's lymphoma, but all of the information is available through our website. And as I said, leukaemia.org.nz. So thank you everyone. Again, a big thank you to Tara.
Very welcome.
Go well.
For having me. Absolutely. Stay well, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.